know what it's like when you feel like you no longer fit into the space you occupy. That feeling of hunching your shoulders to get through a door that once seemed so wide. It's like waking up one day and realizing that your favorite clothes no longer fit, not because you've changed size, but because your soul has expanded. You look at the walls of your room, the routines of your day, the relationships you've built, and something inside you whispers, "This is no longer enough." I remember how we used to feel guilty about this discomfort, as if there's something wrong with wanting more space, more light, more possibilities. You wonder if you're being ungrateful for the life you have, for the pots that others have so carefully planted for you. Sometimes you try to convince yourself that you should be satisfied, that you should adapt better, bend a little more, take up less space. But the truth is that the nature inside you doesn't know how to lie, it just grows. I know you felt that restlessness on silent nights, when everyone is asleep and you're staring at the ceiling. A persistent thought that comes back even when you try to push it away, "There's more to me than this." It's not unbridled ambition or ingratitude. It's simply life wanting more life. It's your true self asking for passage. Like a plant that doesn't choose to grow, it just responds to the call of the sun. Perhaps you've noticed the pain in the joints of your spirit. Those places where you bend to fit in where others expect you to be. In work that no longer challenges your soul. In relationships where you hide parts of yourself. In friendships where you can never be completely honest. In family expectations that you carry around like a heavy rucksack. Pain isn't there to punish you, it's there to wake you up. How many times have you found yourself imagining a different version of your life? Not necessarily with more things, but with more truth. More alignment between who you are on the inside and how you live on the outside. A space where your roots can fully extend. A place where you don't have to apologize for taking up the space you would naturally occupy. A world where your growth is celebrated, not contained. And then comes the fear, that old acquaintance who whispers that it's better to stay where you are. It lists all the reasons why you should be content. Security, familiarity, the expectations of others, fear of hurting those you love. Fear paints the unknown in dark colors and makes your current discomfort seem acceptable by comparison. It's convincing, isn't it? It speaks a language you've known well since childhood. You've probably already tried to negotiate with its growth. Just a little longer, you say to yourself. I can hold out a little longer in this tight space. I can put it off. I can squeeze in. I can breathe less deeply. As if you could convince your roots to stop growing, to make do with the little bit of soil available. But healthy roots don't know how to stop, they just follow their purpose. I understand the loyalty you feel for the pot that has sheltered you until now, for the job that has given you stability, for the relationship that has been a safe harbor, the identity that gave you a name and a place in the world. There's genuine gratitude there, and it's right to feel it. That vessel has fulfilled its purpose. It protected you when you were just a seed, an idea, a possibility. There's no contradiction in honoring the past and yet needing more. Notice the small cracks that have already begun to appear. Those moments of inexplicable irritation. The fatigue that won't go away with rest. The interest in things that were never part of your world before. The most vivid dreams. An attraction to people who live very differently from you. Curiosity about paths that once seemed absurd. These cracks aren't defects, they're the first signs of new life finding its way in. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to explain yourself to others? That feeling of not fitting in anymore. People look at you and see the same old thing, the same old look, the same old job, the same old life. They don't see the inner growth, the pressure of roots against walls, the daily effort to keep everything as it is when everything inside you wants change. It's lonely, isn't it? That period between what you were and what you are becoming. There's a peculiar guilt in wanting to break the vase, especially when it was given with love. When parents, partners, mentors, or friends chose that vase for you, believing it to be the best. When they dedicated time, resources, and dreams to keeping it there. The last thing you want is to appear ungrateful or to hurt them. So you try to grow silently, holding back, waiting for a moment that may never come naturally. But know that true love never wanted to limit you, it just didn't know how big you could get. And finally, there's that decision point that you feel approaching. That moment when it will no longer be possible to reconcile what you are becoming with the limits of your current vessel. When the options come down to two, allow your roots to atrophy to fit where they are, or honor your growth even if it means breaking down structures. This is the point where many retreat, where fear wins out, where stories of potential turn into stories of regret. But you're beginning to realize that it's not about destruction, it's actually about liberation. Look out of the window with me for a moment. See that tree over there? It started out as a tiny seed, perhaps carried by the wind or dropped by a bird. In the beginning, any small container would suffice for it. A simple glass of water would suffice. But what if someone, with the best of intentions, decided to keep it forever in that first glass? What would happen to that tree that we now see swaying freely in the wind? Nature offers us this wisdom every day, but we rarely stop to listen to it. Think of the butterfly emerging from its cocoon. There is a specific moment when that protective structure turns into a prison. The same cocoon that protected it during its deepest transformation now needs to be broken. And note this, no one considers the breaking of the cocoon to be an act of violence or ingratitude. It's simply the next necessary step. Have you ever observed how children grow? First their shoes get tight, then their blouse sleeves get shorter. Parents don't feel sad when they buy new clothes, they celebrate growth. Nobody asks their child to stop growing to fit into last year's clothes. However, when it comes to the growth of our spirit, our purpose, our inner truth, we are suddenly expected to settle for spaces that no longer fit. There's a difference between breaking something through destruction and breaking something through expansion. When a seed breaks its shell, it's not violence, it's birth. When a river overflows its banks in spring, it's not calamity, it's abundance seeking new paths. When your truths, your gifts, and your purposes no longer fit within the boundaries that have been set for you, the pressure you feel is not rebellion, it's life insisting on manifesting itself fully. The seasons teach us about the need for rupture. Winter looks like death to those who don't understand cycles. The trees lose their leaves, the world goes silent, everything seems to stop. But beneath the earth, invisible to the hurried eye, an essential work takes place. Roots deepen, nutrients are reorganized, strength is gathered. Your moment of discomfort, of not belonging, of pressing against the walls is just like this winter. It's not the end, it's preparation. Think of all the great stories you've ever heard. In all of them, there's a moment when the main character has to leave the safety of the known to fulfill their destiny. Nobody is moved by stories where someone refused the call and remained comfortably in the same place forever. Something in us recognizes that growth requires movement, that movement implies leaving spaces, that transformation requires the courage to break boundaries. Imagine if the ocean apologized for making waves, if the mountains were ashamed of their height, if fire held back so as not to shine too brightly. What would become of this world if everything great was diminished so as not to be a nuisance? This is what happens when we deny the natural expansion of our being. It's not just you who loses out, it's the world that is deprived of your full expression, your unique contribution, your particular light. There is a dangerous illusion that makes us believe that stability means immutability, that in order to maintain what is good, we need to avoid any change. Look at your own body, it maintains its stability precisely because it is constantly changing. Cells die and are born, blood circulates, lungs expand and contract. True stability is never static, it's a dynamic balance, a constant dance between what remains and what changes. Those who truly love you don't just love what you are today, they also love what you are becoming. They haven't fallen in love with a version frozen in time, but with a moving, evolving being. When you honor your growth, you're not betraying those who love you, you're inviting them to get to know a new facet of the mystery you've always been. The deepest relationships are not boxes, they are shared journeys. Think about the big changes in your life so far. Remember how you dreaded some of them? How impossible it seemed to adapt to a new reality. And yet here you are. You've survived. More than that, you've integrated these changes into your story. What seemed like an unbearable disruption became an essential chapter in your journey. That ability to adapt and integrate hasn't disappeared. It's in you now, waiting to be triggered again. There is an ancient wisdom that says, you can't step in the same river twice. The waters are always flowing, always renewing themselves. In the same way, you are never exactly the same person as you were yesterday. The question is not whether you will change or not, you are already changing with every breath, every thought, every experience. The only real choice is whether you allow these inner changes to manifest externally, or whether you try to contain them within structures that no longer accommodate who you are becoming. Life has a natural movement of expansion. Look at a forest, it doesn't plan to grow, it doesn't need permission, it doesn't apologize. Where there is space and conditions, life simply moves forward. Your restlessness, your discomfort, your feeling of not belonging are not signs that something is wrong with you, They are indications that you are aligned with the deeper nature of life. You are feeling in yourself the universal impulse of expansion that moves from the galaxies to the smallest sprout in spring. The first step towards honoring your growth is to recognize that the feeling of constriction is not your enemy. That pressure you feel against the walls of your current vessel is a form of intelligence, your essence recognizing that it needs more space. Pain, discomfort, and restlessness are a compass pointing to where you need to expand. Instead of trying to silence these signals with distractions, learn to listen to them with curiosity. They contain precious information about the next step in your journey. There is a subtle but important difference between running away from something and growing beyond it. When we run away, we are reacting to fear. When we grow, we are responding to a call. Take an honest look at your impulse to change. Is it born out of fear of what you have now or a vision of what could be? The rupture that comes from growing up doesn't carry anger or resentment, just a quiet recognition that it's time for more. Like a child who doesn't hate the cradle but simply doesn't fit in it anymore. Our culture values what is large and visible, but true transformation begins in the invisible. Before the plant breaks through the soil, it develops roots. Before the butterfly breaks out of its cocoon, it dissolves and reorganizes itself in the dark. Your growth is following this same natural pattern. Don't worry if there are no visible changes in your external life yet. The most important work is happening in the depths, where you are developing the strength you need to sustain your next phase. One of the most liberating discoveries is realizing that you don't need to have all the answers before you take the first step. The clarity you seek rarely comes from prolonged contemplation. It emerges from movement. When a seed begins to germinate, it doesn't know exactly what it will look like as an adult tree. It just follows the next natural step, trusting in the momentum of life. Each small movement in the direction of its growth will bring more clarity than 1,000 hours of motionless worry. You are not alone on this journey of breaking boundaries to grow. Look around, human history is littered with people who have had to break the vessels that contain them. Artists who abandoned safe styles to explore new expressions. Scientists who challenged established paradigms. Leaders who left comforts to serve bigger visions. Ordinary people who refused lives too small for their spirits. Your challenges are unique, but the process is universal. You are participating in a great tradition of human courage. We often fear that by breaking the vase we will lose everything it contains. But look, when a plant grows beyond its original pot, it doesn't lose its roots, its essence, its history. It carries with it everything that still serves its growth. By honoring its expansion, you're not abandoning your core values or true connections. You're creating space for them to also grow and express themselves in new, broader forms. Remember that growth isn't just forward movement. Sometimes it's deepening. Like a tree that, in order to grow taller, must first deepen its roots. This uncomfortable period of pushing against walls can be precisely about strengthening your foundations, clarifying your deepest values, reconnecting with your essence. What looks like stagnation on the surface could be crucial work in the depths, preparing the ground for a quantum leap when the time is right. There is an invisible economy in the universe. When we honor our authentic growth, we create space for others to grow too. By staying in too small a vessel out of fear or guilt, you're not really protecting anyone, you're just demonstrating that compromising with smallness is acceptable. Your courage to expand may be exactly the permission someone close to you needs to do the same. Like a single bird that takes flight and inspires the whole flock to follow. A powerful discovery is that the limitations you face don't always come from outside. Often, after the external limits have already expanded, we continue to act as if we were still confined, following invisible rules that no one else is imposing. Like an adult elephant that could easily break the small chain on its foot, but doesn't because it learned in childhood that it couldn't. Examine carefully how many of your current limitations are just memories of walls that no longer exist. Growth rarely follows a straight line. There are periods of rapid expansion followed by moments of integration and consolidation. There are attempts, setbacks, new beginnings. The river doesn't follow the shortest route to the sea. It bends, encounters resistance, creates new channels. Don't be discouraged by apparent setbacks or periods of stillness on your journey. They are a natural part of the process, moments when you are gathering strength and wisdom for the next move. A fundamental change happens when you begin to see discomfort not as a problem to be eliminated, but as a gateway to growth. The pressure of your roots against the walls of the current pot is not a mistake, it's an invitation. Restlessness isn't your enemy, it's your ally. Discomfort isn't trying to punish you, it's trying to set you free. When you embrace this perspective, the same tension that once seemed unbearable is transformed into energy for change. Finally, understand that honoring your growth is an act of love, not just for yourself, but for everything you touch. A plant that allows itself to grow fully offers more oxygen, more shade, more fruit, more beauty to the world. In the same way, when you allow your essence to express itself fully, without the limitations of two small pots, you're not being selfish, you're increasing your capacity to contribute, to love, to serve. The world doesn't need your resigned smallness, it needs your courageous greatness. The journey of growing beyond your current limits doesn't have to be a dramatic and abrupt move. Nature rarely proceeds by violent ruptures, it prefers the power of gentle persistence. Notice how the roots of a tree can, over time, break through the most solid concrete, not by a sudden attack, but by constant, patient pressure. Your growth can also proceed like this, with small but consistent steps that honor both the need for change and the time needed for integration. The most common fear when we consider breaking our limiting vessels is that of losing connection. We fear that by expanding, we will lose important people, familiar places, recognizable identities. There is wisdom in this fear. It reminds us of the importance of connections. But there's a broader perspective. True connections are alive, capable of stretching, of growing together. What doesn't grow with you may not be a real root, but an anchor in disguise. Notice how there are already small spaces in your life where you feel less constricted. Moments, places, or relationships where you breathe more freely, where more authentic parts of you find expression. These are your growth laboratories, windows onto a wider life. Instead of looking for a big break all at once, consider how you could expand these spaces of freedom, gradually allowing them to occupy more of your time and energy. A powerful question to ask yourself is, what would be possible if fear wasn't making the decisions? Not to deny fear, it has its protective function, but to recognize when it has overstepped its role and begun to direct your entire life. When you allow yourself to consider paths beyond those approved by fear, new possibilities emerge. You realize options that have always been there, but which remained invisible while fear controlled your vision. Something transformative happens when you begin to see yourself not as a finished product trying to fit into fixed structures, but as a constantly evolving process. Trees don't apologize for producing new leaves, flowers, or fruit. That's simply their nature expressing itself through the seasons. In the same way, your changes, expansions, and transformations are not detours or mistakes. They are life manifesting through you in new forms, responding to the seasons of your own journey. In many ancient traditions, moments of great personal transformation were marked by rituals. These rituals recognized that moving from one phase of life to another is not just an external change, but an initiation. They honored both what was being left behind and what was emerging. You can create your own little rituals to honor your transitions, ways of thanking the vessel that has sheltered you so far, even while recognizing that it's time for more space. Something that facilitates the growth process is finding inspiring examples, people who have gone through their own expansions and necessary ruptures. Their stories remind us that what seems impossible in the midst of pressure and discomfort can, looking back, turn out to be life's most important turning point. These witnesses to possible paths don't have to be famous or distant. They can be ordinary people who have found the courage to honor their own authentic growth. When we consider big changes, we tend to focus on what could go wrong. It's a natural protective mechanism, but an incomplete one. Expand your vision to consider this too. What can go right? What becomes possible when you honor your growth? What talents can flourish? What impact can you have? What joy can you experience? What contributions can you make? Growth brings challenges, yes, but it also brings gifts that remain inaccessible as long as we stay in spaces that are too small. Remember that growing beyond your current limits doesn't mean rejecting everything that came before. When a child learns to walk, they don't disregard the crawling that brought them there. They just integrate that skill into a broader capacity for movement. In the same way, your growth doesn't have to negate the value of previous phases. Every limitation you faced, every pot that held you back had its purpose. They weren't mistakes, they were necessary stages that prepared you for now. A perspective that brings peace to this process is to recognize that you are not fighting the world or those who created or maintain the limits that now constrict you. You are simply participating in the natural movement of life. The seasons don't fight each other, winter is not the enemy of spring. In the same way, your expansion need not be an act of rebellion or conflict, but an honoring of the next natural cycle. both for you and for everyone involved. A liberating discovery is realizing that you don't need to justify your growth. The seed doesn't explain why it needs to become a tree. The bud doesn't defend its right to bloom. In the same way, your need for expansion, for authenticity, for a deeper alignment between your inner self and your outer self is self-validating. You don't need to construct elaborate arguments or get permission from anyone. Life seeking more life through you is justification enough. Finally, know that the journey of growing beyond your current limits is not a finish line, but a continuous path. Each new stage will bring its own challenges, its own constrictions eventually. There is no end point where you will be completely free or totally fulfilled. The invitation is to embrace your own process of growth and expansion as a natural part of life, learning to recognize the signs, honor the timing, and trust the movement. This is true freedom, not the absence of limits, but the ability to transform them when it's time to grow. At the center of this whole process of growth and rupture is a simple and profound truth. Life wants to live through you in its fullest expression. It's not your ego demanding more, it's not unbridled ambition, it's not rebellion, it's the very force that moves the stars and opens the flowers working through your unique being. When you feel that pressure against the walls of your vase, that need for more space, more truth, more alignment, you are feeling the same power that moves all of nature. The oldest stories of humanity are full of images of rebirth. The phoenix rising from the ashes, the snake changing its skin, the hero who descends into the underworld and returns transformed. These are not just pretty fables, they are maps for the human journey of transformation. They remind us that we have always done this over countless generations. The path you are traveling now, this path of leaving behind structures that have become too small for your spirit, is a path as old as humanity itself. There is a rhythm of expansion and contraction in all living things. Look at your own breathing, it naturally expands and contracts. The tides rise and fall. The seasons come and go. Your life also has these rhythms. There will be moments of rapid expansion and growth, where old structures need to be broken down to make way for the new. And there will be moments of integration, consolidation, and nourishment within new contours. Both are necessary. Both are sacred. There is a wisdom in you that knows exactly what you need to grow. This wisdom doesn't speak the language of logic or convenience. It speaks through your energy, your joy, your inner peace. When you are aligned with your authentic growth, there is a sense of rightness, even in the midst of challenges. Your body knows. Your emotions know. Your dreams know. This internal compass is much more reliable than external opinions about what you should do or be. The beauty of honoring your growth is that by doing so, you create a field of permission around you. Your courage in breaking vessels that limit you demonstrates to others that such a thing is possible. Never underestimate the power of example. How many people silently observe your journey, gathering hope for their own necessary transformations? The poet David Whyte wrote, "Courage is the measure of our sincere sense of belonging in the world. By being courageous, you expand the sense of possibility for everyone." There is a beautiful paradox in this whole process. The more you honor your unique and authentic growth, the more you connect with something universal. When a tree fully expresses its treeness, it no longer becomes separate from the forest, it becomes more deeply a part of it, contributing its uniqueness to the whole. In the same way, by breaking down boundaries to become more truly you, you are not isolating yourself, but participating more fully in the great tapestry of life. Trust the times of waiting as much as the moments of visible movement. Between the moment the seed is planted and the sprout appears, there is a period where apparently nothing happens. But it is precisely in this invisible time that the most crucial work is being done. Your journey will have these periods 2 times when you feel the inner pressure for change, but the path is not yet clear. These are not empty or wasted times, they are times of essential preparation for the next step. Remember that each person has their own timing for growth and transformation. Some plants grow quickly, others take decades to reach their full height. Some people make dramatic changes all at once, others advance in small steps over a long period of time. There is no right way to grow, there is only your way. Honor your own pace. Don't compare yourself to the speed or style of others' journeys. Your life has its own wisdom and timeline. One of the most liberating discoveries is that you don't need to be clear about the whole path to take the next step. In fact, it's often impossible to see the whole path beforehand. Like in the morning mist, you may only be able to see a few steps ahead. That's enough. Clarity comes in movement, not in static contemplation. Each step reveals the next. Every door you open reveals new corridors and possibilities that were invisible before. There is a special kind of confidence that is born when you survive the breaking of a vessel that contained you. You discover that you can face the unknown and survive, that you can endure uncertainty and find new balances, that you can let go and still remain yourself. This confidence doesn't come from having external guarantees, but from knowing your own inner resilience. It's a kind of freedom that nothing can take away from you because it's born of lived experience, not external circumstances. As you move forward on this journey of honoring your growth, even when it means breaking down limiting structures, you begin to realize something profound. Limitations themselves are part of the growth process. Without the resistance of the soil, the seed would have nothing to push against to emerge. Without gravity, muscles wouldn't develop. The challenges you face are not obstacles in the way, they are the path itself, offering the necessary resistance for you to develop your strength and discover capacities that would remain dormant in easier circumstances. I want to leave you with this final truth. You already have everything you need for this journey. Just as the seed contains the complete code to become a tree, you carry within you all the capacities, wisdom, and strength necessary for your own unfolding. These are not resources you need to acquire from outside. They are qualities inherent in your being that are waiting to be activated by the right circumstances. Trust this innate wisdom. It has guided you this far. It knows the way forward. And so we see that growing beyond our current limits is not an act of reckless destruction, but of courageous love. Love for life wanting to express itself more fully through you. Love for those who will be touched by your most authentic expression. Love for the mysterious journey of becoming. As an old Zen master once said, the oak is nothing like the acorn, but there is no other way for the acorn to realize itself. When your roots have to break the pot to keep growing, that's not failure, it's the deepest success. Life fulfilling its promise through you.